Okay, so we are back and we have our 1650 installed in the tower, and we've got all my drivers and everything like that installed at this point. And there's a couple of things I've done. I've gone ahead and done a calibration of sorts and run Unit Engine both with and without OBS running in the background, recording what's going on in my screen capture, or as a screen capture. And what I have found is that OBS costs me about 5% of my average frame rate. Now that's going to change based on the exact scenario, but I'm comfortable saying that most instances where I'm running something are going to see a 5% higher frame rate than my testing here, just because, unless you're streaming, OBS isn't running in the background. Other things I've done, I've run a whole host of synthetic benchmarks, and those will pop up on the screen here in a second. And what I have found is that this card is performing very well on the older hardware. I went ahead and compared my results on my 1650 low profile to other places that have reviewed 1650s and found that my results are within a margin of error of theirs. In some cases slightly ahead, in some cases slightly behind. And in anything that's not overly CPU bound, Anno comes to mind as a game that would be extremely CPU sensitive, you're going to be perfectly happy with even something as old as this 3770. Now, I wouldn't recommend buying a 3770 to undergo a project like this. I'd recommend going a generation or so newer at minimum. Newer systems are going to offer more expandability for PCI Express. And sticking with the Think Centers, we'll talk about the relative value of the system as a whole once we're done with our testing. So I've got, with the synthetics out of the way, with my calibration out of the way, we're just going to go ahead and start off with a couple of things. First thing I want to do, I've got MSI's Afterburner, and Afterburner just has some nice features that aren't present in some of the other cards, or I should say in some of the other pieces of software. Despite their terrible hardware choices on the 1650 that we looked at. Alright, so my on-screen display, they've got this lovely on-screen display that we can use, and I can pick which monitors I want and how I want them to be presented. And we've picked our frame rates, our frame times. These are going to be instantaneous, although I've got a graph of them. Average frame rate and maximum frame rate. And then we'll also have core clocks and GPU usage running in there as well. So with that all out of the way, let's go ahead and start off with something pretty straightforward. We're going to fire up Star Trek Online. This is going to represent an MMO in our test suite. Before we do that, let's go to the NVIDIA control panel and double check that G-Sync is on, since some of the benchmarks, specifically the PC Mark tests, didn't like G-Sync. They asked for it to be disabled. So I've got G-Sync enabled. Make sure that we're set to 144 Hertz as our maximum. Go ahead and open this up. I believe I set F11 for MSI for the OSD. Hold on a second. Now, this is one part, the loading performance that you're seeing here is not something I would count against a system like this as a whole. I specifically installed everything that I'm testing just due to the sheer volume of data on the spinning disks that I put in here. So that's going to be to the detriment of most of my game load times. Now, if I was to do something like this from scratch, I may have opted to get a slightly larger SSD. Alright, so there's my distress call. So anyway, let me finish. I would have opted to get a slightly larger SSD, large enough to handle a couple of games, and just go with that. But since some of the games in our test suite, like GTA 5, are, I believe, on the order of 50 to 100 gigs on its own, there's just no way to fit that on the 120 gig SSD I had sitting on the shelf. Alright, so here in Star Trek Online, things are looking good. I'm seeing 90 frames per second here, just kind of waiting for me to do something. My frame times are good. High frame times are almost as bad as low FPS. That tells you how jittery and jumpy what you're doing is. So let's go ahead and we're going to run through a mission. The reason we're running a mission is that it is a set... there's variables in it because it's an MMO, but it's a set path. I can rerun this mission every single time and have the same general flow. So, if I was to run some kind of STF or other content that would have included players besides myself, there would have been more variables to account there, and it would be a less repeatable experience. I think I may have the graphics set higher than my desktop when I play normally. I don't normally see those that debris flying off, so that's impressive. Looks like over 100 frames in the cutscene. And we'll just let these guys. Come on. There we go. Alright, so... one thing I do appreciate, and I still have the final review for it coming up soon, is that I'm not seeing any of the tearing or anything that I would normally with this kind of variable frame rate, thanks to G-Sync and this ZOTAC panel.
Captain.
Alright, so this should be pretty straightforward. Looks like we're at over 100 frames a second on the ground. Oh hey, you're a bad guy. There we go. And I can't help that guy because I'm not a science officer, but I can shut down the plasma leak that's in here. One thing that I'm not a huge fan of on the low profile cards is I can hear those fans spinning up pretty heavily trying to keep the thermals in check, and that's just a function of the cooler that was installed on that card. I almost would have preferred, for this build, a triple slot cooler would have been fine with a vapor chamber attached to it, and probably would have kept some of the sound in check. Alright, so talk to the captain. will help you. Oh, let's scan some of the fancy drifting gas. Play a little mini game. All right. And oh no, the whole corridor is lined with bad guys now. I think that might be new. I don't think they were Klingons before. You know what? I think they broke something. That didn't look like it worked at all.
But their call for resistance has given us a chance for glorious combat.
I think I might have seen one drop where we dipped to 70-ish frames a second where one of the overlays was coming up. Overall, looks like 100 plus. I mean, 144 in this cutscene. We're running at 1080p. We're running on the auto-detected settings, which we'll double check in just a second here. Star Trek Online is a Direct 3D 11 game. It's not Direct 3D 12. That was a big deal when it updated to Direct 3D 11. It used to be a Direct 3D 10 and even supported Direct 3D 9 application. So. Alright, I'm supposed to go to the bridge through this door. They don't actually use most of these manual transitions in the later games. You don't actually have to go to the, or later missions, you don't actually have to go to the transporter pad to beam up for your ship. $80, $90. Oh, I can see you there.
Attempting to get a transporter lock on Captain Broad, sir.
All right.
Containment.
So, frame rate wise, I mean, none of this was actually pre-rendered, so even the cutscenes running at 140 plus is excellent. Just go back to sector space. Mission's over. Yay. Oh, look at that go nuts at 150. So let's take a look at our... So, yeah, it by default looks like it cranked everything up. We've got no frame rate limit, and None of the usage decreasers are turned off. Auto stabilize off. This is actually a feature that might be handy if you weren't using a variable frame rate monitor. It kind of tries to keep your frame rate consistent, whatever that may be. Display 144 hertz with anti-aliasing, which is normally something I'd turn off. Overall, so we just ran through an MMO. We saw 90 plus, and a good portion of it, I'd say 80 plus, was the typical. Unfortunately, we don't have a chart other than this should have given me, I'll have to check that, should have given me an average frame rate when I was done. Maybe it'll spit it out in a text file. I'll check that in a minute. That said, ran through an MMO. Most of your MMOs are going to target this or even lower end hardware because their main goal is to get as many people playing as possible. So had we put a 1050 or even something older like a 700 series card in here, like a 750 low profile was fairly popular for a long time, we would have been perfectly happy. So as far as that type of game, we've got a good experience here. All right, so now let's go ahead and go to our Steam library here. The next thing I want to do is run through a RTS, and we're going to use Homeworld Remastered for that. This is one of my favorites. It was a big deal when this game got remastered, and I'd love to use Homeworld 3, but that hasn't launched yet. Homeworld Remastered here represents a massive update to what was a game-breaking, or not game-breaking, a groundbreaking game in the early 2000s when it was launched. I've yet to find anything that quite gives you the 3 degrees of freedom in a strategy application sense. Apparently we didn't install, so we'll go ahead and let that do its thing. I thought I bulk installed everything. Alright, so with that install taken care of, let's go ahead and fire up Homeworld Remastered. As I mentioned, Homeworld Remastered represents what was a groundbreaking franchise in the early 2000s, with the first installment being launched in 1999. And it is probably the only game that I've ever played that really represents a true 3 degrees of freedom in a tactical simulation. You'll see what I mean when we start playing. So let's go ahead and open it up. Looks like, I don't know why Steam waits till you go to launch the game to install things like the Visual Studio prerequisites. So, anyway, we're going to go ahead and use Homeworld 2 Remastered. Alright, so it looks like Afterburner auto-detected the 3D application. It looks like Homeworld Remastered is running in OpenGL mode. Let's go to our options here. We've got adaptive frame sync set on, so it's actually synchronizing to the panel. We'll turn on, you know what, let's go ahead and we're just going to restore the defaults. And no frame sync, 4XAA, high texture quality, massive size limit. Alright, Alright, this looks good. So what we've done is we've just let it auto-detect what settings it wants to use, and it basically cranked everything to maximum or near maximum. The only thing that it looks like I could really change that would increase that would be to bring the battle scar limit, which is how small of a ship will have visible damage, down to larger ships. And with the frame sync turned off, look at it go to 700 plus frames a second. I don't expect this to be particularly tasking. We'll go ahead and just set this up. We're just going to feed it a bunch of resource injections because I don't necessarily want a super long, drawn-out, tactically exciting match. Although, if you guys would like to see one of those, by all means we'll do one, but I just want to do a quick graphics test here. Alright, so
Mothership.
do quick builds.
Production underway. Destroy enemy motherships. Production underway. New challenge. Harvest 20,000 resources. New challenge. Destroy 20 enemy ships.
And it looks
New
like
challenge.
we're
Build 20
running it
ships.
above
Scout
the
squadron complete.
144
New
hertz
challenge.
refresh that
Research
the
10 technologies.
Roger.
panel's
New
capable
challenge.
of, so that's
Survive 20 minutes.
Collection confirmed.
excellent.
Scout squadron complete. New fighters available for construction.
Construction underway.
Mothership. Scout squadron complete.
Turn off my ship count there, since that's not.
Scout squadron complete. New upgrades available. Mothership research
All
module
right,
complete.
so
Bomber squadron complete.
Acknowledged.
Scout squadron
this
complete.
is an interesting.
Copy.
Upgrade complete.
Bug,
Build 20
I guess I'll
ships.
call it. I can't click on any ships to build that are in that third
Mothership
slot.
fighter
So,
facility complete.
huh.
New challenge. Build 40 ships.
Roger.
Group 1 designated.
Strike group coordinates locked in. New formation acknowledged.
Bomber squadron complete. Mothership. Production underway. Upgrade complete. Production underway.
Group 1 copies.
Bomber squadron complete.
Strike group, prepare for assault.
Upgrade complete.
This should be. Ooh, there we go. Some nice big flashing lights push us all the way down to 100 frames.
Attacking capital ship.
And let's go ahead and start harassing
Standing by.
that.
Subsystem target acquired.
Mothership. New upgrades available. Mothership Corvette facility complete. New corvettes available for construction.
Ready. Construction underway. Construction underway. Assembly underway.
Mothership. Production underway.
Reporting.
Sensors are detecting an unidentified relic. Send ships to investigate.
Under fire. Requesting orders.
Resource injection received.
Bomber squadron complete.
Group 1 copies. Strike group under enemy attack.
Taking damage, fleet.
Built 40 ships.
Roger. Subsystem attack confirmed.
New challenge.
Really
Build
want
80
to take that
ships.
fighter facility
Scout
away.
squadron complete. New upgrades available. Mothership frigate
So
facility
far,
complete.
it
New
looks
frigates
like
available for construction. Mothership.
we may
Carrier
actually
corvette facility
be
complete.
CPU bound here, not
Volvo,
that
ready for
we're
orders.
really
Scout
seeing
squadron
any kind
complete.
of bad performance,
Production
but
underway. Scout squadron complete.
Group 1 copies. Reporting.
Group 1 reinforced.
Strike group prepare for assault. Ready.
Group 2 designated.
Bounty received.
Scout squadron complete. New upgrades available. Mothership hyperspace module complete. New capital ships available for construction.
Strike group reports hostile contact. Engage capital ship. Group 1 standing by.
Carrier frigate facility complete.
Scout squadron complete. Upgrade complete.
Group 2 copies.
Production underway. Upgrade complete.
Strike group under enemy attack. Assembly underway. Berths are clear. Assembly underway. Strike group receiving fire.
I'm taking hits here. Drawing heavy fire.
Construction underway.
Bounty received.
Construction underway.
Bounty received.
Assembly underway. Group 1 copies.
Upgrade complete.
Under attack. What's the call? Heavy fire confirmed.
Strike group to battle positions.
Insufficient resources. Upgrades paused.
Strike group under enemy attack.
Strike group under enemy attack. Under fire. Requesting orders. Strike group reports hostile contact.
Strike group reports hostile
well,
contact.
that was interesting. I saw the animation of their shipyard firing before it actually fired.
Group 1 reporting.
New upgrades available. Mothership capital ship facility complete. New capital ships available for construction.
Group 2 copies. Attacking capital ship.
Group 1 has defeated the enemy.
Strike group attack order confirmed.
Gunship squadron complete.
Subsystem target acquired. Strike group under enemy attack.
Mothership. New challenge. Destroy 40 enemy ships. Upgrade complete.
Group 1 reporting. Confirmed.
Group 1 reinforced.
Drawing heavy fire.
Strike group prepare for assault.
Insufficient resources. Upgrades paused.
Group 2 copies. Strike group receiving
Well,
fire.
that didn't take long.
Taking damage, fleet.
Resource injection received.
Strike group prepare for assault. Strike group under enemy attack. Group 1. Strike group reports hostile contact.
Upgrade complete.
Confirmed.
Bomber squadron complete.
Bounty received.
Gunship squadron complete.
Berths are clear. Strike group under enemy attack.
Bounty received.
New challenge. Build 160 ships.
Group 1 standing by. Group 2.
Bounty Bounty received.
Mothership.
Acknowledged. Attacking capital ship. Roger.
Upgrade complete. Researched 10 technologies. Bonus resources awarded. Bomber squadron complete. Group 2 reinforced.
Bounty received.
Attacking capital ship.
New challenge. Research 20 technologies.
Strike group receiving fire.
Bounty received.
Mothership.
Bounty received.
Confirmed. Strike group attack order confirmed.
Oh, let's just
Copy.
get that scout away.
New research available.
Subsystem construction complete.
Gunship squadron complete.
Berths are clear.
Gunship squadron complete.
Assembly underway. Assembly underway. Construction underway. Ready. Strike group prepare for assault. Group 1.
Bounty received.
New crate detected.
Group 1 reporting. Strike group receiving fire.
Scout squadron complete.
I'm taking hits here. Group 2 reporting.
Under attack. What's the call? Heavy fire confirmed.
Strike group reports hostile contact.
Under fire. Requesting orders.
Research complete. New upgrades available. Gunship squadron complete.
Under attack. What's the call?
Bounty received.
Destroyed 40 enemy ships. Gunship squadron complete.
Group 1 standing by.
New challenge. Destroy 80 enemy ships.
So this is probably the worst performance I've seen anywhere, is when I'm really focused in on, zoomed in on a specific model. And even then, I'm still seeing, 80 plus frames a second, which,
Gunship squadron
thinking one of these is due to explode in a second. That's probably going to be okay, so we got a couple of bright flashes from an EMP.
Strike group under
And-
enemy attack. Strike group under
Come on,
enemy
it's
attack.
got like one hit point left for that one. There we
Heavy
go.
fire confirmed. Under fire. Requesting orders.
Okay, so,
Group 2 reporting.
yeah, let's
torpedo frigate complete.
have another big, pretty cinematic explosion here.
Drawing heavy fire.
Upgrade complete.
Group 2
Or not.
standing by.
Huh.
Strike group to battle position.
Okay.
Strike group
Well-
reports hostile contact.
Bounty received.
Shipyard Corvette facility complete.
Gunship squadron complete.
Strike
Expected
group
to
reports
see-
hostile contact. Under attack. What's the call?
There we go.
Subsystem target acquired.
Resource injection received.
Ready. Standing by.
Bounty received.
Really?
Torpedo frigate complete.
Berths are clear. Berths are clear. Berths are clear. Acknowledged.
Bounty received.
No problem. This is a cakewalk.
Alright, this is part of what I was talking about with this three-dimensional map
Bounty received.
is... So I've given an order, and I can actually instruct a location for hyperspace in this case,
Initiating hyperspace
in all
jump.
three dimensions
Bounty received.
for, in
One
this case,
standing
just a
by.
couple of frigates.
Group 2. Strike group under enemy attack.
Bounty received.
Exit coordinates confirmed. Subsystem attack confirmed.
Ion cannon
Disable its
frigate
engines.
complete.
Standing by. Moving to intercept.
Insufficient resources. Research paused.
Standing by. Roger.
Torpedo frigate complete.
Group 1 copies. Group 1 copies. Group 1 standing by. Strike group attack order confirmed. Group 2.
Reporting. Reporting. Ready. We got him napping. No problem.
I'd love to be able to build a battle cruiser before this is over.
Under fire. Requesting orders.
Bounty received.
Maybe I should have cranked up the injections a little higher.
Insufficient resources. Research paused.
Bounty received.
Research complete. New upgrades available. New capital ships
There we
available
go.
for construction.
Group 1 reporting. Acknowledged. Group 2 reporting.
Let's go ahead and
Subsystem attack
to
confirmed.
destroy this ship, but we do want to cripple it.
Bounty received.
Enemy neutralized. Awaiting orders.
Bounty received. Bounty received. Bounty received.
Subsystem target acquired. Group 1 reporting.
Upgrade complete.
Subsystem target acquired.
Destroy the capital ship facility so we don't get a surprise destroyer or something like that to contend with. So we're mostly just dragging this out
Group 1.
because I can.
Capital ship locked in. Enemy neutralized. Awaiting orders. Group 2 standing by.
Resource injection received.
Ready. Capital ship locked in. Ready. Group 2 copies. Strike group attack order confirmed. Subsystem target acquired.
Heavy fire
That didn't
confirmed.
take long.
Strike group reports hostile
Let's see.
contact.
Took out the capital ship facility and it got rebuilt.
Strike group to battle positions. Group 1 reporting. Strike group to battle positions.
Harvested 20,000 resources. New challenge. Harvest 40,000 resources.
Group 2 reporting. Roger. Attack coordinates locked in. Group 2 copies. Acknowledged. Attacking capital ship. Group 2 copies. Strike group prepare for assault.
Where is... See
Strike
a
group
gun
reports
platform,
hostile
so where's the
contact.
platform controller?
Strike group receiving
I see
fire.
one.
Bounty received.
Taking damage, please.
Copy.
Battlecruiser complete.
Acknowledged. Roger.
Alrighty. One battle cruiser.
Bounty received.
Destination locked in.
Construction underway. Construction underway.
Bounty received.
Torpedo frigate complete.
Bounty received.
See how the AI is trying to kind of escape up. So we're going to go ahead and position ourselves above that.
Group 2 reporting. Exit coordinates confirmed. Guidance failure. We're losing control. Subsystem attack confirmed.
And take out its engines.
Reporting.
Frigate lost.
Attack coordinates locked in.
Boundary, this is Ford. How far away?
Bounty received.
And this should be a quick, decisive end.
Torpedo frigate complete.
Unfortunately, Homeworld 2 generally turns
Destroyed
into just a
8
rush
enemy
to
ships. Bonus
who can build a
resources
battle
awarded.
cruiser
Drawing heavy
first.
fire.
Survived 20 minutes. Bonus resources awarded. New challenge. Destroy 160 enemy ships.
Target entered the dust cloud. They're off our sensors.
Neat little
New
ships,
challenge.
although
Survive 20 minutes.
Bounty received.
the design on this has definitely got kind of a Star Wars vibe
Relic
with that
captured.
geometric, elongated profile.
Bounty received.
And that's it. So we didn't see any dips below 60 frames per second. We do see
Friendly unit.
some
Bounty received.
relative abuse when we see the larger
Neutralized. Awaiting
scenes.
orders.
Oh, there we go. So we got a dip below 60
Battle
for an
cruiser
explosion.
hyperspace module complete.
I could have turned down any of the graphical settings that it cranked up to compensate for that. So here in my options, I mean, even something as simple as just turning the anti-aliasing off may have just made any of those drops we saw go away. It did run on OpenGL, which I think there might be a way to force the game to launch as a DirectX code path instead. Don't quote me on that, however. Overall, very impressive. Like I said, strategy games like this are going to stress the CPU more than the graphics card. And we could see that the graphics card really only got to 50, maybe 60% utilization in a couple of cases. And if I check hardware monitor here, the CPU temps were up, and although I didn't peg it at 100%, we were at 90% plus for the duration of some of that. So I'm going to go ahead and kill Homeworld Remastered now. Go ahead and let those resume. So, if you're looking to play strategy games and things like that, I will very much encourage what I've already said a couple of times in swapping this out for something like an 83, an M700, a 710, which are going to come with a bigger CPU. And although I wouldn't go overboard on buying something like that, you know, an i5-7400 would have been a nice jump up from this 3770. Next up in our testing is going to be Minecraft Java Edition. Simply put, if I didn't cover Minecraft, everyone would be upset with me. So we're going to go ahead and cover this very popular game, as I'm sure many of you know. I know my kid goes through phases of being addicted to it depending on what week it is. And I'm sure any of you with children experience exactly the same thing. So we're going to be using the Java edition because it's more flexible as far as modifications are concerned. There's a long history of Minecraft servers with mods. It's what I play personally. I don't really have anything against the Bedrock Edition as it is. You know, it's fun to play it on my phone. But I find the lack of my own central server a bit problematic. And I know they're working on kind of converging everything together eventually. So, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and fire this up. One thing we will be doing differently than what we normally do is I'm not going to use my server for this test. I'm actually going to have Minecraft generate a new world here. Usually when we're viewing things like mini PCs, let's go ahead and bring this up to the full screen here. There we go. Let's see. And what else do we want to do? Full screen is on. Graphics are set to fancy by default. Smooth lighting, maximum frame rate. We're going to just uncap that. There's no... there we go. Kill VSync. And let's go ahead and fire up a survival world, and we're just going to set this all to normal. There we go. That's what I wanted to see, was turn on the bonus chest. The reason I'm actually using this system to run the world as well as play is I've actually used this particular box with this CPU as a server previously. So I'm full well aware that it's capable of it. So just go ahead and grab all these things. Is that cooked? No, that's raw. And we'll just take this stuff too. Overall, pretty smooth here. Very low frame times. Running around with all this set to the defaults, I'm seeing 190 frames a second. Which is absolutely astounding. Yeah, so we're going to cut down this tree. And we're just going to play for a few minutes and build a house. And is that a beehive? That is a beehive, so we're not going to mess with that. Because I think he'll be angry with me if I bust up his hive. And we'll just take advantage of Minecraft physics, allowing things to float in the air. 100 frames, 130. Sounds like things are warming up, which is, you know, I expect a small frame rate drop off when things warm. Go ahead and just bust up some seed plants here. None of this, none of these particles are really punishing things. So this is good. Let's just go ahead and alright, so I want to say it's lava that it's usually kind of problematic for a lot of systems because it generates a ton of particles. So we're just going to go ahead and put down a bunch of it. fly around here. So we've got some fire going on, we've got lava everywhere. My frame rate is actually not as stable as I would like it to be. I can see it bouncing up and down rapidly between what looks to be like 175 and 169 frames a second. I'm still, I've caused mayhem here, and still looking at something reasonable. I say reasonable. 30 frames a second would have been reasonable. So this is just astounding. So we're going to just get ourselves some TNT. And let's see here. I thought that was in tools. There it is. And we're just going to, I don't know, we'll take away the smaller island over here. We'll just pack the whole thing and set it off. How much TNT does it take to make an island not exist anymore? I don't know, but we're just going to make sure we use enough. Probably could take a look and do the math on the blast resistance. I think sand only has like a blast resistance value of 5. This is starting to feel a little excessive, but why the hell not? We're still cruising along at like almost 300. I think I saw 190-ish a second ago. This is the kind of thing that I'd never actually do on a server because it would cause lag for the other players, but as far as a punishment test, as it were, this is about as good as I can get. So we've got, that brought us down to 86 for just a second, and as ever, Minecraft physics is broken, since instead of water here, I now have a hole. Oh, and it took out part of that island too. So the island's gone, and that's what we were going for. Performance-wise, if Minecraft is on your list, honestly, a setup like this is overkill. Unless you run some really extreme redstone mods. As I mentioned before, I've used this 3770 for hosting Minecraft servers before. And I'm more than comfortable seeing it play Minecraft. To see frame rates at a worst case hit 30 frames a second when I blew up hundreds of TNT to just make an island go away. And normally we're floating at, above my monitor's vertical refresh rate here. So we're seeing in the 190s to 250s. There's not a whole ton more to say about it. For a game like Minecraft, if you're playing vanilla, you're fine. Do whatever you want. If you've got a ton of redstone mods, maybe it might struggle a little bit. The 3770 is not a new CPU, And I've seen people build entire computers in Minecraft before. So I'm not going to promise that, but I can only really test the base game. As far as Minecraft, I know is CPU bound typically, so as far as this combination goes, it's fantastic. It looks like the GPU is sitting at 40% usage. It's not even boosted up to its base clock rate right now. If I take a quick look over here at open hardware monitor, the CPU did hit 100%, which probably would have been when we set off all the dynamite. Let's reset it real quick. And we'll just check what the CPU usage is with something more reasonable, like, I don't know, 6 of these. So that made a ton of particles, and we peaked at 35%. So, like I said, Minecraft, not an issue. Build like this, probably play Minecraft and games like Minecraft for years to come. So, with that said, let's go ahead and get on to our next piece of testing. Another simulation game that I absolutely enjoy is Kerbal Space Program here. And we're going to fire it up, and it's going to take a second to launch. I believe we may even be below its recommended specifications at this point. So while I wait for my launcher to show up, which is thanks to a hard drive, let me check what is actually the recommended. Oh good God. So the recommended is an i5 with 4 gigs of RAM and a video card with a gig. That's from System Requirements Lab. I don't really trust them as much as I would from, here we go, the actual KSP Wiki. Recommends Windows 10 with an i5, 8 gigs of RAM, and a DirectX 10 graphics card with shader Model 4 and 1 gig of video RAM. So, okay. Close this. Close this. Let's go into our settings here. And we're going to bring it up to full screen at 1920 by 1080. And turn off VSync and crank the frame. Can I just turn it off? Alright, well, it looks like I have to put some kind of frame limit on here, and 180 frames per second should be fine. Default render quality is set to fantastic with a half-res texture. I'm actually going to bump that up to full-res texture, and a we'll leave the terrain on low, which was what it defaulted to. So the only things we've changed in here, we've turned off VSync, we've dragged the frame limit super high, and brought the texture quality up to full. So that's in the rendering here. We're going to apply those, we're going to accept it, and we're just going to start a new game. And I'm going to start a sandbox game because you don't want to watch me sit here and figure out how to, generate enough science points to get the things that I need or want. We just want to go into the vehicle assembly building, design something, and launch a rocket. Alright, so, as much as I love the graphical overlay here, it is making some of this a little bit harder to see. So I'm going to fuse that. There we go. There we go. Alright, so we're just going to strap Mark 1 command pod. I'm turn this back on now. We're going to give it an inline stabilizer. I really should have nope, wrong size. And I just need a Mark 16 chute. That ought to do. So now we'll just put it on a large fuel tank, and then we'll go with a liquid engine. So there we go, fuel tanks. Nope. Oh, that's for the airplanes. There we go. The FTL 800. That's what I was looking for. So we'll give it a couple of those. And for engines, we'll just give it that. And we'll go with a 4-fin design. So we actually want to add a stage in there. All right, and bring it to the launch pad. And it has been a minute, so let's see here. Set our thrust to 100%. Turn our RCS and SAS on. And off we go. And we've got a relatively simple rocket here. We've got a physics simulation going. It looks like we're at 160 frames a second. Nudge that a little. No, I didn't want to bring the throttle all the way down. Well, I should have looked up my control keys before I started this, because what I wanted to do is tip it just enough so that we enter orbit. No. It's what I get for not having a decent design saved and, double checking the controls. It's been a little while since I've played this. Absolutely love this most of the time, though. So let's go ahead and bring that back on. And we're going to that might be enough for near orbit. Probably not. So I just saw a little bit of a jitter there. I saw it there again. This isn't doing poorly, though. I'm asking it to maintain 160 frames a second. It looks like it's the CPU that's holding us back here. Let's just double check hardware monitor. Apparently I closed hardware monitor, so let's fire up Task Manager instead. Yeah, it looks like the CPU might have been pegged at 100. For something built out of spare parts, though, I'm asking it to do a relatively accurate physics simulation. We'll go ahead and give it a time warp here. Did I really send Jebediah to deep space? I think I might have. Nope. No, there we go. He'll come back down soon. We'll just let it warp until... I think I may have cooked my Kerbal. Yep. Well, yep. I don't think I've had that happen before. Either way. Not bad. Really good frame rate here. Temperatures seem relatively under control. Actually, the CPU is doing better than I expected it to. Looks like we're running at one of our turbo bins even. So, Kerbal Space Program, it kind of like Minecraft, where depending on how complex you want things to be, really tells you how much hardware you need. There are things I've seen people do in Kerbal Space Program that would absolutely bring my Dual Xeon desktop to its knees. This game is just massively scalable, and unfortunately that also means you have to draw your own conclusions. I can present it to you here. I can say this is great, it's running at 180 frames per second, even with some of the settings that I turned up that were higher than what it wanted to by default. But if you're the kind of person who's going to put 1,000 satellites in orbit, and that's how you like to play, you may not be happy with a 3770. There's just not enough hardware there. So that's kind of the conclusion on both Minecraft and Kerbal Space Program. They work well, and anyone who isn't going way off the deep end is going to be happy with a system like this. If all you want to do, which is normally what I want to do, land on the moon, maybe plant a couple of flags, and have one or two orbiting space stations type thing. There's no reason this wouldn't be more than sufficient for that. Alright, next up in our test suite is one I'm going to confess to not having played and, well, not even having purchased until it was announced in a big splashy deal as the free item of the week on the Epic Game Store, and that is GTA 5. I know GTA 5 still represents a relatively older title, even though 2013 doesn't seem like it was quite that long ago. But it is still a demanding title, and it's still a popular one. So we're going to go ahead and use it here. Now, I haven't played Grand Theft Auto since, I think, San Andreas on the PlayStation 2, so I'm not fully sure what I'm going to encounter here. But we're going to go ahead and fire it up and see how it behaves on the 1650 and the 3770 that's in here. Although that said, a 3770 would have been a contemporary high-end processor in 2013. I believe GTA, well, we'll see in a second here. Alright, so it's a really blurry opening cinematographic, so that's fun. Looks like we may be frame rate limited or vertical sync enabled. We're running at 60 frames a second in the little intro screens here. Alright, calibrate the display. Distinguish all the segments in the bar below the logo. Yeah, that looks fine. Let's check our settings first. And I specifically want my graphics settings. Can I change it to... Alright, so we're going to set it to DirectX 11. I don't know why we wouldn't set it to 1080p. Refresh rate. Set it to 144. Just turn off VSync. High. And we're just gonna crank everything up to high, or what looks like Alright, and we're going to apply the changes. Alright, apparently I have to restart for something I did. But it looks like there's a benchmark, so that's convenient. It says it's running, so it must have auto restarted, and we'll see it pop up in a second. There we go. All right. Oh, it's under advanced graphics. start with those, but we are going to run the benchmark. Which is convenient that it has a built-in benchmark, since it won't require individual gameplay. This will be 100% reproducible. This is certainly one I regret having to use spinning media on. However, this game is literally too large to install on the SSD that I'm using as a boot drive in this system. And this makes an excellent point for if I were to order something like this and, you know, spend the money on building it, I may spend a little less money on RAM. You know, I stuffed 32 gigs of RAM in here because I had it available to me, and I might spend more money on a larger SSD just to take advantage of that. Alright, so this is definitely game engine footage with the settings as you saw me adjust them to. And that was fantastic. That was all 100 frames a second or higher from what I saw. I did just see a dip into 90. Our frame times are holding steady. I'm not seeing any massive dips or drops. We're definitely GPU bound here. A bigger graphics card would have resulted in more performance. That said, a faster graphics card would have required a compromise somewhere on the PC that was used. You might get away with something like a 1660 if you were to get one of the larger mini tower systems. But those still usually have a proprietary and smaller power supply. The power supply in this system, I think, is only 230 watts off the top of my head. It might be 250, which is enough for the hardware I can put in this case. Alright, 100 frames. That is beautiful. I'm actually going to have to spend time playing this later. Wait a second, that's not a tank. You're not supposed to be able to fly anything that's not a tank in Grand Theft Auto. I realize I'm dating myself with that. I know that the frame rate's dancing around a bunch, but I'm actually impressed that I'm not seeing it change on this monitor because it is running as a VFR. We haven't gone below or above the variable range that G-Sync allows us. Impressive detail in the broken glass. I wonder if they're doing physics calculations on the graphics card for that. I didn't see a physics logo launching it though. Anyway, so that covers GTA 5. It looks like it was more than happy to run at 100 frames a second or higher. Hoping it gives me a printout, as it were. Target. Next up, we're going to go ahead and play a match in World of Warships. And this is one where there's definitely some variability in it, since I can't control 19 other people, as it may be, for the 20-player matches. But I can jump in and I can run through a battle in, let's grab a Tier 4 destroyer or something like the Clemson, I think I've got available to me. A configuration like this is still in the realm of, although World of Warships isn't quite an MMO where it's trying to appeal to the same audience that someone like Star Trek Online or World of Warcraft would appeal to, it is still, multiplayer online. It's not some kind of immersive single-player experience or a first-person shooter. So they are still trying to invite your friends. Yeah, I don't want to do any of that. I think I may have more ships than slots. Yeah, here we go. Tier 4 destroyer. Do I have... Alright, so... shipment speed. Alright, so this is one I need to run anyway. And, yeah, we're not going to make any modifications to the ship. We're just going to queue up and go for it. It has been a while since I played World of Warships. I got sucked into it for a long time and then kind of fell out. Love the game still. So... just haven't had as much time as I would have liked, so yeah, I'm not going to worry about the AA screens. Big race, pretty typical one. Yeah, the Clemson's pretty quick, if I recall correctly. Most of the destroyers are pretty quick. Alright, oh, I'm on this side of the map. I don't really like being on this side as much as the other one.
Battle starts.
Well, still, let's go ahead and we're gonna go...
Autopilot mode enabled.
go for that. I actually ran a game. I ran a game for this without recording it the other day, just to get a feel for it, because it had been a while. Totally forgot that I even had torpedoes as an armament here. Oh, it looks like each side has a carrier. I see what appears to be aircraft. Oh, my carrier's pink. That's never good. Well, this is interesting. Usually you see somebody try and just slip straight through the middle. Not so much. There we go. Oh, I think I wasted my torpedo salvo there.
Our team is taking the lead.
Which is unfortunate.
Waypoint reached.
Huh.
Autopilot mode disabled.
That battleship just must not be paying any attention. Speaking of paying attention,
Our victory is in sight. Our victory is in sight.
alright, cool. So that just leaves them with one carrier, which is that way. Frame rate seems fine, 75 frames a second, a little lower than we've been seeing in a few things here. But that seems very, very stable. Oh look, there's that carrier. What's the distance to it? 12 kilometers, and yeah, there we go. So 75 frames a second, very solid, very stable. I didn't see any real dips or spikes. Frame times are stable, so there's no real jitter. Everything feels nice and fluid and smooth here. I'm not as good at this as I'd like to be, but that's besides the point. So that's fantastic performance here in World of Warships for something that was, slapped together out of spare parts. I didn't notice that we appeared to be really held back by the CPU, which is good. That tells me that, like I mentioned, a larger form factor tower probably would have performed better. Next up, let's go ahead and run Space Engineers. Space Engineers is an interesting game. It's definitely a simulation game of sorts. It's kind of, I don't want to say it's Minecraft in space, but it's kind of like Minecraft meets Kerbal Space Program with a little bit of some FPS thrown in. You do have rifles, and one of the earlier missions has got you running around and trying to survive, as it were. So it's an open world sandbox, build what you want type game again. But it does have some combat elements to it. Looks like it's another Direct3D 11 title. I'm kind of disappointed at how Direct3D 12 hasn't caught on the same way Direct3D 11 has. Direct3D 12 specifically is supposed to be less CPU intensive than Direct3D 11. Alright, so let's just check our graphics options first. Looks like everything defaulted to medium. Texture, shadow, anti-aliasing. Alright, display 16:9. Purple sync is disabled by default. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and just do a new game. I'll just go with the first jump. One thing I am noticing is that, unlike World of Warships, well, I'll wait till we're in game to say anything. I think the game may be attempting to limit itself to 120 frames exactly. Alright, we're going to skip through that, and yep, so... Open the door. We're going to go to the bridge. Now the frame rate's a little less stable than I would have liked. We're access denied. But it's not terrible either. I've seen dips into the 90 frames per second. Oh look, some debris. but I haven't seen, anything that plummets and says this is terrible. Frame time chart looks decent. I am seeing periodic blips on it, but nothing. Right. It's absolutely terrible. Yay, I have an oxygen bottle. So there was a hang up there as it was loading new textures in. But I don't think that that's the CPU or the graphics card really fighting with me. I think that's the hard drive pulling new data in. Oh no. I guess we go this way. So this is another one where the performance that I'm seeing here in the base game is definitely acceptable. I wouldn't be upset with this if I had, built this system specifically to play Space Engineers. This was my big game that I wanted to play. But the things that I'm seeing are some of the same kind of things that we've noticed in a couple of other games where, oh, my suit's got no energy, so I have to go. No, I don't want to change my appearance, I want to charge my suit. And pick up whatever this stuff is. So anyway, as I was saying, the things that I'm picking up on playing this are, I'm seeing some jitter and jump. And that's not that the CPU is overloaded trying to process everything. I can see the CPU's kind of just chilling at 40%. The graphics card's at nearly 100% usage. We're at 94%. So we've got a good match there. The larger graphics card would have given me better results. However, oh hey, somebody blew up my ship. Faster storage would be the first thing that I would have picked. An SSD would have, I shouldn't say eliminate, but reduced all of the loading jitter that I've seen a couple of times when I'm entering new areas. Especially since I'm kind of running around at maximum speed through the map, so we don't take too long on this. The other thing I will say is that I know this is a very scalable game. It is kind of like Minecraft, where, if you want to just load it up with mods and go way too far with, what do they call it, Clang, you're going to make the CPU cry. And that's unfortunate, but that is what it is. I mean, I could stuff this full of mods and do physics hacks and bring my dual socket workstation to its knees. So you have to take that into account, that while I'm saying, hey, this is great, this is running at, about 120 frames a second, about 100 frames a second through the entire mission. The performance that I did was completely stock. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of Space Engineers because I don't actually need to play through all these again. And then we are going to, let's see, we've tested Star Trek Online, Homeworld 2, Minecraft, GTA 5, Space Engineers, World of Warships. I guess we need a big first-person shooter. And what better for that than Doom? So we're going to fire up Doom, and we're going to use the, well, we'll poke around in it with the DirectX code path, and then maybe we'll try the Vulkan code path for a comparison number. Oh, that's right. Doom doesn't have a DirectX code path, it's OpenGL and Vulkan. Well, OpenGL is going to be our worst case, so that's what we're going to start with. I love all of these warnings in random languages every time I launch Doom. So also the first time I've played Doom on a hard drive, so this is definitely a longer than I'm accustomed to loading time. Yeah. Well, the left logo's not visible at all, so for the first time, yeah, we'll go with 1.2. All right. You know what? I didn't even check my my graphics settings.
They are rage, brutal, without mercy. But you will be worse. Rip and tear until it is done.
This is about how I wake up on Monday mornings most days. At least how it feels when I've got a bunch of support tickets waiting. Alright, so, real quick. Full screen, vertical sync, I think adaptive takes advantage of GeForce. Set AA, it's set AA to 8x, high motion blur, 90-degree field of view. OpenGL, custom quality, and it basically dumped us all to medium with 4x AA and a large texture page, which should take advantage of probably turbo cache. It'll probably store extra stuff in RAM. High reflections, medium particles, ultra motion blur. Alright, so it kind of just defaulted us to a middle of the road setting. things look good. They don't look as good as they could. But we're also not absolutely
We have to contain this.
maxing everything. Well, I shouldn't say we're not maxing everything. The CPU is bored. CPU is running, 40%, 30%. It's the graphics card that's taking the brunt of this. Which, once again, is encouraging. If you had a larger tower with this CPU, although I wouldn't suggest feeding it a 2080 Ti, a 1660 wouldn't be a bad step up. Those weren't dramatically more. In fact, some of them were in the same ballpark as what I paid for this 1650. You know what? We are going to turn off the VSync. Because I don't think that it's doing what I think adaptive should do.
Cannot determine the cause of the demonic invasion until the Resop satellite is brought back online.
Welcome. I'm Dr. Samuel Hayden. I'm the head of this facility. I think we can work together and resolve this problem in a way that benefits us both.
Yep. There we go. Oh, look, a shotgun. 100 frames a second, not bad. Overall, everything feels fluid. Nothing feels jumpy or like the system's fighting with me, so that's encouraging.
Demonic presence at unsafe levels. Lockdown in effect.
All right. And there's a dip to 70.
Demonic presence at unsafe levels. Lockdown in effect.
Stop running and let me shoot you. I think there was one more hanging somewhere. There you are. Oh, there's two more.
Lockdown in effect. Demonic presence
Yay.
eliminated. Lockdown disengaged.
Some armor. Probably should have grabbed that earlier. Whatever. Some shotgun shells. Some health boost. Armor.
We cannot be allowed to leave this place. We will ruin everything.
Alright, so this is is running at above 100 or running at above 60 frames a second. I think the worst I may have seen during combat there was 70. It looks like the cutscenes are pre-rendered at 60 frames a second, which is disappointing. Maybe they're just forcibly enabling some kind of vertical sync. We're going to go ahead and quit this and relaunch it as a Vulkan application, and I'm hoping it spits me back at that gore nest. If not, we'll play forward to that point and get our result here. Interesting. I specifically used a shortcut that said Vulkan, which should... Can I just bypass the... It didn't get detected as Vulkan by Afterburner. We're going to check in a second and see if that's Afterburner lying to us, or maybe I should have just gone to the main menu and changed my... Alright, so we're just going to go to my settings. Alright, so it didn't go to Vulkan, and we're going to leave everything else the same. Huh. Well, would you look at that? Afterburner picks it up as Vulkan now. Alright, so game slot 1. Is it going to make me restart the mission manually? Man. Alright, so can I yeah, we'll just restart the mission. 700 frames a second.
They are rage, brutal, without mercy. But you will be worse.
Well, this is interesting. I think I remember this specifically running at 60 frames a second before, but it seems to be running at 100 plus now. Yeah, that's a little intro scene running at above 60. I wonder what was keeping the... else. Alright. I really don't need to listen to her ramble a second time. Alright. Get me my suit. Yeah, okay. So this is definitely pre-rendered or locked to 60 for that animation. So it looks like some cutscenes are pre-rendered and some cutscenes are running just real time.
Cannot determine the cause of the demonic invasion until the Resop satellite is brought back online.
Welcome. I'm Dr. Samuel Hayden. I'm the head of this facility. I think we can work together and resolve this problem in a way that benefits us both.
Should be some kind of bonus for headshotting all of them. So Vulcan's definitely averaging a higher frame rate, which is interesting, since my GPU usage hasn't really changed any.
Lockdown in effect. Demonic presence at unsafe levels. Lockdown in effect.
Hey, I shouldn't have blown that up.
Demonic presence at unsafe levels. Lockdown in effect.
Oh, come on.
Demonic
All right.
presence eliminated.
So there's our gore nest, and I think the lowest I saw at any point in there was 90-ish. Once again, everything felt fluid, everything felt good. I didn't notice any massive drops to a frame rate that was making me go, hey, what the fuck just happened? Sorry. I didn't notice any drops that made me go, what the hell just happened? Overall, I wish the settings were a little higher. I could probably crank the settings a little bit higher, since most of this defaulted to a kind of a medium setting, and make a couple of trade-offs and get some better visuals in here. You know, I could probably bump my texture detail and decrease things like the motion blur, maybe turn off either the AA or the anisotropic filtering, Running something like Doom 2016 at 1080 frames a second, or sorry, at 1080 at over 90 frames a second, over 60 frames a second even, on hardware like this is a fairly impressive feat. We're seeing good utilization on the graphics card, so I think I've said it a couple of times. Bigger case would have meant possibly a bigger GPU, definitely would have given us some better performance there. Okay, so we've run quite a few benchmarks on our little gaming system here, and we've got a good general feel for what kind of performance we're looking at. In a modern MMO, we're seeing reasonable levels above 80 frames a second. In older titles like Homeworld 2, we saw well over 140 frames a second. We were, other than dips in massive cinematic effects, we were held back by, in this case, the monitor's refresh rate. So we got some good results there. Minecraft, same kind of thing. Unless I push the CPU by just doing things that were designed to break it, we were fine. GTA 5 generally was in the 100 frames a second area when we tested it. World of Warships maintained a solid 75 frames a second. Doom 2016, big AAA first-person shooter, maintained 70 frames a second for the for OpenGL and 90 using Vulkan. I would expect Doom 2019. I would expect Doom 2 to perform slightly worse. In my experience, it's a little more taxing on things, but it generally runs fairly close to its predecessor. Space Engineers, nice big sandbox game. We were able to run at 100 frames a second. Kerbal Space Program, another one we were able to run at relatively high frame rates up until we, cranked the simulation speed up too high and blew up our little rocket. So overall, we're looking at a mixture of, I've got a 3770 here, and there's a couple of applications where I could feel that the CPU was the limiting factor. Simulation games, things like Minecraft, things like Space Engineers, things like Kerbal Space Program, love as much CPU as you can feed them, and once you reach a certain simulation complexity, you're going to go above and beyond what you can do in a 3770. Even though all of those ran at fantastic frame rates now, if you start piling mods on top of Space Engineers, if you start building massive rockets with multiple space stations and things running on multiple planets inside the area, Kerbal Space Program is going to start to bog down a bit. Minecraft, same thing. It ran perfectly fine when I was doing normal stuff, and up until I made an island go away, was content to run. But if I've got enough redstone in there to simulate, a processor or a giant calculator or something like I've seen people do, or if I've got some ridiculous mods on there, I'm gonna feel a pinch, and it's going to be the CPU that feels it first. Because those things don't generally increase the graphical demand, they increase the load on the CPU. So, all of that said, for a 1080p gaming system, if I was to look at how much we've spent, I'm actually not that far out in my pocket. So this system here, which is not what I would recommend purchasing, is a ThinkCentre M82. And the reason that I'm saying I wouldn't buy it today is things have moved since then. This is a 3770 that makes it Ivy Bridge. The oldest that I would want to purchase would be Skylake if I could. So if I look up M82, so this Think Center here, this model here is going to run you less than $100. If we look at the added costs that we've made changes to it, you know, we're going to ignore the difference between the 3470 and 3770 for this. If I buy an M82, I spend less than $100 on it, and then I go out and buy a reasonable sized SSD and the GPU that we used here, we're looking at, you know, 170 for the GPU after tax. We'll round it up to a full 100, just since there's variance there for the tower. And then, you know what, let's just check right now, and I'm going to say we're going to go overboard and buy a 1 terabyte SSD, which you can get for under $100. So that is what, 200, 270, and $30 for another 8 gig stick of RAM. Congratulations, for $400 you've got a respectable gaming system. But for not a dramatic additional amount of money, and cutting a couple of corners by, say, buying a smaller SSD, you can get, I don't know, a 500 gig, which would be more than enough for a typical gaming system for less than $50. Okay. So if I'm going to be happy with a 500 gig SSD, you can get a newer system than this. Let's look up, I don't know, an M710. In fact, this here, I believe that is a quad-core i3 at a reasonably high clock rate. Nope. 2 cores, 4 threads. Okay. So here's a 710S, which is a much newer i5, and it's going to run 239, which I know is a lot more money. But 239, $170 GPU puts me at 400, and then I said, you know what, 50 for an SSD and 30 for some RAM. We're looking at $480. We're still below $500, and that's getting us a much newer processor. That 7400 is now not officially Skylake. That's what came after Skylake. That's Kaby Lake. So that's a quad-core i5. And that's going to be a nice, snappy quad-core i5. And this is already shipping with a 1 terabyte hard drive. You could skip the SSD portion and just be happy with the HDD, and there's $50 out, and you don't have to buy the RAM out of the gate. And like I said, these systems, this one has a Windows 8 license key on it. That one's going to have a Windows 10 Pro license key on it. You're already getting a licensed copy of Windows, which if you build a system yourself and you legitimately purchase Windows, those run like $160. Buying an old tower like this and rehabbing it, as long as you don't need the absolute peak frame rate, is an excellent way to get a respectable gaming system without investing a ton of money. Now, I mentioned a couple of times that I was bound by the CPU in games, and that I was bound by the graphics card. and not the CPU. The 1650 is a good card for 1080p gaming. I was able to maintain 1080p with either high or reasonably high levels of detail in all the games I ran. However, if you wanted to step things up to 1440, it's probably not going to be quite so happy. That's more detail. If you really do want to run at 120 or 144 frames a second, which most of the games that we demonstrated really don't benefit from that, but something like Doom, if you're out running death matches every day, or if you are playing first-person shooters, frames is the difference between winning or losing in some of those. They're really Twitch-happy games, and they're not really my favorite, but they are what they are. There are larger towers. This is a small form factor variant. There is, not that I would suggest purchasing this one, I'm just bringing this up as an example. These mini towers. And the big thing to keep an eye on with these mini towers is, I know specifically the Think Centers, they use a proprietary power supply. And it's the same motherboard even in the small form factor and the full tower systems. So it's the same proprietary connector on the power supply. And although this, actually, this one, depending on what it goes for, wouldn't be a bad deal since it's already shipping with a 512 gig SSD and that i7 7700. Anyway, depending on what power supply they have in them, so this 210 watt power supply isn't going to feed a graphics card much bigger than what we used in here anyway. Although you could physically install a full height 1650 and potentially get more performance because it will have better cooling and therefore be able to maintain higher clocks longer than the small form factor version we had to use. I should say low profile version we had to use. There's not a ton of extra power for jumping up to, say, a 1660, which most of those require a supplementary power connector, or even some of the 1650 overclock cards that require an additional 6-pin PCI Express power. Because those cards have higher power budgets, you can quickly run out of that 210 watt that power supply is rated for. When you look at, okay, we've got a 7700 that is I think 95 watt CPU. No, sorry, that is a 65 watt CPU still. But we know it can go over 65 watts thanks to Turbo Boost. It's allowed to exceed that as long as it has the thermal headroom for a period of time. You could end up with perfectly valid components in an unstable system because you've oversubscribed your power supply. And I know I've been picking on Think Centers here specifically. All of the vendors have them. So HP has their Elite Desk units. So here's a Elite Desk small form factor 6700, which is a good chip. That's a Skylake i7. I'd be perfectly happy with one of these. 8 gigs of RAM, 500 gig hard drive. I'd shop around a little bit more. I would really avoid spending more than $200 on one of these if you can help it. Here's a reasonable one, and this is a tower again. So this is another i5 6500. This is an HP Elite Desk. And did they specify the power supply in this one? They don't. I'd probably look up what the power supply is if you can. And usually with these systems, if you go to the manufacturer webpage, they will tell you at least what the wattage on the power supply is. So from a value standpoint, the question then is, could I have built a system out of new parts cheaper than? Will give myself $550 as a budget? And the answer is sort of, but not, and been happy about it. For that kind of price, you're generally going to buy, a cheap case is going to run $50. A cheap motherboard would not make me a happy person if I was buying the motherboard. I have a hard time spending less than $100 on a main board. On the CPU side of things, the available inventories on CPUs are hit and miss right now. If you wanted to build something new on Intel's 10th gen, it's hard to find those chips in stock. The Ryzen 3 systems, which I know we haven't talked much about AMD in here, I'll get to that in a second. The Ryzen 3 chips are easier to find, but it's hard to justify not using the top-end motherboard and getting that PCI Express 4 connector, and moving to the older stuff doesn't save you a dramatic amount. And it's really easy to spend $200 just to get a decent CPU when building a new system. And that's before you even touch on, is the included cooler any good? On the Intel systems, I usually put the included cooler on a shelf and replace it. AMD's Wraith Prism coolers are relatively reasonable. So it certainly might be possible to build a system under $500, but anytime I've looked at budgeting one out, there's always some kind of concession that ends up getting made with that. And those concessions usually end up being things like, it didn't come with Windows. So that $160 price for that Windows certificate of authenticity has to come out of your budget or be acquired otherwise. Not that we condone such a thing. The motherboard, if you do decide to cut corners on a cheap motherboard, they generally aren't that great. I've seen some budget motherboards really cause a lot of problems and fail relatively early. And when you look at the build quality on them, or some of the choices and things that are made there, you wonder why I didn't just spend an extra $30 on a motherboard. Well, the answer is you were trying to save every penny to meet a specific price target. Anyway, so I digress. The reason a lot of these that I'm showing relative to this system are Intel systems is because up until Ryzen launched, Intel didn't have a ton of competition, especially in the business market. AMD was relatively absent from the business market up until basically last year and this year with the launch of the newer Ryzen chips. There is a variety of reasons for that, most of which are outside of the purview of this specific video. I'd be more than happy to talk to some of those if you guys would like to see that. But needless to say, it's just not as easy to find used AMD business systems on eBay. Whereas a used Intel system is very easy to find. And on the Dell side of the equation, those systems, by the way, are, HP's got their Elite desks, Lenovo's got their Think Centers. No, not HP Optiplex. For Dell, it's going to be the Optiplex systems. Specifically, I find the 7000 series Optiplexes are the best value per dollar. And actually, Dell and Lenovo generally do the same thing. Lenovo has 7 series, 8 series, and 9 series Think Centers. And the 8 series, which is what this is in the middle. And you'll find that the distinction between the three is generally twofold. The lower end systems will typically not offer the highest end CPUs that are available. They will also tend to have, either no USB 3 ports or less USB 3 ports when you're looking at old systems, whereas the higher tier models will have more USB 3 and will have better options on the CPUs. The M82, the M72, and the M92 is an excellent example of. The M92 was USB 3, all the way across for this model. The 72 didn't have any USB 3. And otherwise, the 82 and 92 were identical, and I think the 92 might have been the only one that offered an i7 in the box. So, but anyway, so Dell's Optiplex systems, the 7010 is the same generation as this, so you'd probably want like at least a 7020 or a 7040. We'll look up. 7040 gets you Skylake, and you know what? Here is, once again, $200, gets me an i5 6500, 8 gigs of RAM, and this is coming with a 2 terabyte hard drive. So that's great. That's a nice upgrade if you've got a large library, and you know what? Slap a 1650 and another 8 gig stick of RAM in here, and you're off to the races. Outside of that, you can shop around and pick whichever one. There's really not a huge quality distinction that I've seen in at least these little small desktops. Everybody's got something they do well, and everybody's got something that they do poorly. I have found that the HPs might offer what looks like a slightly more attractive case. The Dells and Lenovo's are kind of just black boxes, although the Dell's a little more stylish with some of their trim. Lenovo's I've always had an easier time getting into and adjusting things into it, whereas the Dell Optiplex units, actually I haven't had as much experience with the Dell Optiplex units recently. So their old cases used to be terrible. Anyway, so each vendor, has its ups and downs, and you can look at the specs very easily, just punch it in and bring it up to know what features the motherboard does and doesn't have. Same thing though, for less than $500 with any of these, you're going to be able to get yourself a very respectable gaming system. And outside of the absolute latest AAA titles, I can't imagine having any real issues running things on sane settings. I mentioned that when I ran Doom, I didn't run Doom cranked all the way up, although I probably could have cranked it up a little bit more and still at least hit 60 when I was running it under Vulkan. So you do have to keep in mind that, yes, ray tracing looks nice and pretty, but I'm not going to get it when I build a gaming system this way. The one thing I will say is that if you do find one of the larger towers, and it does have, say, a 400 watt power supply in it, if you choose to go that route, there's no fault in getting a bigger graphics card than you need today, since that is an easy component to move forward. And what I mean by that is, so I built this with a 3770, expecting to be more CPU bound than I was. And I was okay with that assumption, because I have every intent that 2 years, 3 years from now, the 1650 will still be a respectable card at 1080, and I'll be able to take this and pull that card out, pull my drives out, get a similar system to this one with, let's say, a 7700 in it, or a 6700 in it, for next to nothing, or maybe I will be able to find, a 9000 series processor in a couple of years at this $200 price point. And for doing it that way, I will have an easy, clear upgrade. Just pull the graphics card out and put it in the new system. If I was GPU bound already, I wouldn't have anything to carry forward, and I'd feel really hesitant to build a whole new system all over again. That's just, personally, I don't like doing it that way. Some people do, but I find, that's how you get a dozen towers that are just sitting around collecting dust. That's not very space efficient, and, well, you've seen how big my studio is. I don't exactly have space on a premium. With all of that said, I know this has been a excruciatingly long video at over 2 hours at this point, but I want to thank any of you who've watched the whole thing, and if you skipped around, I hope I didn't miss anything that you were interested in. As always, I want to thank Electrix for providing our opening and closing themes. I also want to take time to thank our patrons who help make content like this possible. If you have any questions about any of the selections we've made, please leave a note in the comments below. And once again, thank you for watching.